First thing you want to do is take off this cotter pin, which I'm going to do right now. And I'm going to have to replace this because it just broke. Usually you want to replace it every time you take it off anyways, for that exact same reason. Because every time you bend it to lock it in place, the metal is going to weaken. So you're going to want to replace this cotter pin every time you take it off. So you might as well just buy a box of them if you plan to work on your car often, and have them ready. Okay. Now this time I have all my tools. The other day when I was doing this, I didn't have anything, so I have to keep going to the parts store and getting that shit. This is a 46mm socket. It's an 18-inch breaker bar. Then I got to get a cheater pipe. Now this very expensive piece of technology is just basically a fence post. A very thick one. It's not the cheap kind. Or I don't know what kind of pipe this is, but anyways, it's strong. Put that on the end of your pipe. On your wrench. Get in gear and put a block or something behind the wheel, and then try it again. There we have it. Took me about 2 minutes, but I made the mistake of not having the car in gear and also not putting a brick or something behind the wheel. You should always chalk your wheels anyways, which means putting a block or something behind the wheel so when you're jacking it up, just to prevent it from rolling, which is another thing, safety precaution I did not do. Got the car jacked up on the jack stand. Went ahead and put the brick I had behind the back wheel in front of the front wheel. I was saying is I don't know what the torque spec is for the lug nuts, but you should torque them with the torque wrench. Check the torque specs in the owner's manual, online, on the Samba, wherever. It's the axle nut that has to be put on there pretty tight. It's at least 240 pounds of pressure. I just noticed a drip coming out of my brake drum. So that means my wheel cylinders are leaking pretty bad. The handbrake is on, so I can't take the drum off. So release the handbrake. The reason why you should have a brick blocking your wheels, your front wheels. Wow, look at all that brake fluid dripping. Yeah, there's brake fluid inside the drum. So, recommend putting a rag on the floor. You're working on the brakes, unless you don't care about your driveway. Also recommend having a clean work area as far as the ground is concerned. You want stuff flying up into your brake area. So these are new brake parts, hardware. These springs here, these are all new because the other ones broke. This is new here. That broke. That's what actually caused everything. So, okay. So what we're looking at here is the right rear or passenger side brake drum from a 1969 Volkswagen bus, type 2. This happens to be a Westy. And if you look here, you can see that looks like it's wet. That's brake fluid leaking out of the brake cylinder. I don't remember when I replaced these brake cylinders. I'm pretty sure these are new. But I've had this bus since at least 2007, so that's like 10 years. I'm not sure what the life expectancy of a brake cylinder is, but this is not a German one, I don't think. It's probably Brazilian. The quality is probably not going to be as good. If I can, I'm going to get some Brazilian ones. I find that you don't want to go cheap on any of the brake parts because it could be dangerous. So I'm going to go ahead and take this off and get a new one and replace it. And hopefully that'll solve my leakage, my brake, the brake fluid leakage into the brake drum, and I can bleed my brakes. Alright YouTube, I'm just going to walk you through the disassembly here of the brake parts disassembly in order to replace the wheel cylinder. I think there's a few other people on YouTube that have these videos, but since I'm doing this, I'm going to go ahead and film it for you guys. So this is the first part I take off, is this spring here. It's pretty easy, if you guys can see. Took this one off first. I'm taking this off in order that it should be put back on, actually. So I take this one off first, then I take these off, and again, this is the order that I put it on. So these are like the last pieces that go on. If you can hold this pin in the back while you're turning this so it stays stationary, because it's slotted. So then I take, oops, make sure you save all this stuff. I'm saving it because this is all brand new, but if any of this stuff looks kind of worn out and stuff, I say replace it, because again, these are your brakes, so you don't want to mess around with that. You want to make sure that you got good stuff on your brakes. Sorry about the wind. Okay. So you take these off. And so now that I got these off, I can spread this apart and I can get it out of here. And that was pretty easy. This is the hardest part because this is the strongest spring here. Just go ahead and do what I was doing earlier. Okay, yeah, so once I got this all off, now you can take off the handbrake cable, and here you go. This is the way you want to put your assembly together. This should all be together when you put this on. Okay, that's the only way you're going to get this spring on there. It has to be on already. It has to be attached to the two brake pads before you put the pads on here. The problem with that is that these, when you're trying to open this up to get them on here, you risk the chance of ripping these. And that's what happened here. And there goes all my brake fluid. There's a hole in this one. Okay. That doesn't really matter because if it's leaking, brake fluid is going to come out through this here. So the problem is that this thing is leaking, and you should be able to rebuild these, but you can rebuild these, but I don't know if they sell the parts anymore to rebuild these. So it's since I'm going to replace it, I'm just going to take it out just so I can see what it looks like. Ah, there you go. There's the culprit. Hopefully you guys can see that. Do you see that rubber there? It doesn't go all the way around. It's freaking busted. So that's why I was leaking so much brake fluid. If I could replace this seal, I wouldn't have to buy a new brake cylinder, but I don't think they sell replacement parts like I was saying. Let's take a look at the other side. So this boot is okay. It doesn't have any holes in it, I don't think. Let's take a look at the piston inside the wheel cylinder. Let's check the seal on that one. This one is not broken, but it's also not in good condition because I don't see how this is going to seal anything, because it doesn't expand very far past the piston itself. So this seems kind of loose too. You know, you want pistons to be tight. So anyways, I mean, maybe this ring acts like a seal to keep out, to help, I don't know, help with the pressure, or as a seal as well. But anyways, this shit's no good. Gotta replace that. So glad I know what the problem is and that it was a serious problem which requires replacing. So I'm going to go ahead and take care of that problem. The other side isn't leaking crazy like that, but I would recommend replacing both sides anyways. But I don't never take my own advice, so I'm not going to do that right now. Okay. I'm going to take off the brake line, and hopefully you guys can see it. There's the brake line. Alright. Hopefully I got the correct size this time. This is 11 millimeter. Alright, so that came off pretty easily. I see a lot of guys on YouTube when they're doing this stuff. These bolts here that hold the brake line to the backing plate are usually pretty corroded, and they bust, they break. Actually, it's the nipple, that bleeder valve tends to always break too, and that's like an 8 millimeter, you know, wrench or whatever. So it's easy to strip. I'm using a regular open end wrench. I'm using a cheap Chinese brand, Pittsburgh, from Harbor Freight, I think. I don't recommend using this. I recommend using the correct tool, which is I don't know if it's made for brake lines, but it has a special end on it, so it has more than just 2 sides that are grabbing the bolt. It has, I believe, 4 sides, but it's still an open end. I recommend using that whenever you're dealing with these brake line parts, because these things will strip, and like I said, because they're usually rusted and corroded. But mine are not too bad because I've done work on my brakes before, so they're in decent shape. I already have the 13 millimeter bolt on the other side off, so I can take the wheel cylinder off. So yeah, this is a Brazilian brand brake cylinder. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says Varga on there, which is, I guess, a company out of Brazil, and they make replacement parts for V-dubs. I don't know if it was this car, but I basically cleaned the hell out of these backing plates a long time ago, so they're still in pretty good condition. I think I probably cleaned them and painted them, so they're still pretty clean. You see some people on YouTube working on their brakes, and shit, man, those things are dirty, rusted, nasty. So I recommend taking them off, cleaning them up, painting them, using some high temperature paint, anti-corrosive paint, and this brake fluid is really corrosive. Thus the gloves. I would recommend wearing rubber gloves whenever you're working on your brakes. This stuff is pretty toxic, the brake fluid, the brake dust, all that stuff. Safety glasses, if you have them. Alright, so it's up to the parts store. That wheel cylinder, I spent $60 so far on brake shoes and brake hardware. I'm going to clean these brake pads off, get all that brake fluid off of them. They're brand new. Get the brake fluid off of them, and so I can reuse them. I should probably be using a cleaner rag, but dry them off so they look dry. You can see this one has a little bit of brake fluid on it. Use brake parts cleaner. That'll help get rid of the brake fluid. Helps keep all your stuff dry, which is what you want when you're dealing with brakes. So make sure there isn't any brake fluid around. That stuff's corrosive too. It'll probably eat away at the springs, even though they're metal. All this stuff is metal. That brake fluid, let it sit on anything for a long time, and it'll start to eat away. So you want to make sure all your parts are clean. All your brake parts are clean. I'm just wiping off, wherever I see anything that looks wet. Make sure you got clean gloves too. When you're putting all this stuff back together, my gloves are dirty, so when I put this all back together, I'm gonna put on a clean pair of gloves. That trick worked really well. Putting this this lever and the spring, attaching it to the brake shoes, putting these sections on first, getting one side in, and then using a screwdriver as a lever to pry the brake shoe back in order to get it over into this side. The other trick I did was pull the boots off and put them onto the shoes first, folding them back. Once you get the shoes on, then you can put the boots on. Then the last piece is going to be putting these two springs and then this one on top of it. I don't know if you notice that this one lays on top of these two. So I put the springs on so that way they hook in from the front and the spring is in the back. Same thing with this one too. Originally they were coming in from the back, so the hook was coming out this way, which is really hard to get the springs on that way. Anyways, once I get all these springs on, then I get the handbrake cable on, and then last is to put these on. So these are the easiest compared to everything else to get on there, and they're the last ones to go in. So we're done here. Now we just gotta put the drum on in the wheel and bleed the brakes. It'd probably be easier just put the drum and then bleed the brakes and then put the wheel on. Went and bought one of these cheap ass brake bleeder kit from AutoZone or O'Reilly or something like that. So how this works is pour a little bit of brake fluid in the container. It already has a hose inside there, so you want that to be inside of the brake fluid, and then you attach another hose to the end of this. This one's a little loose. You want it to be tight. All right, that one's a little bit better. Then you attach this to the bleeder valve on the back of your brakes. Alright, so I went ahead and put the the hose over the bleeder valve. I don't know if you guys can see that there. It's right here. Now that that's on there, it's pretty tight, so no air is going to get in through here. You loosen this up and then you start pumping the brakes. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then the other side is over here. It has a magnet, so that works out. That's handy. They say this should be up. I don't know if that matters, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. And start bleeding the brakes, adding brake fluid. I'm going to go add some brake fluid to the master cylinder reservoir, and then start pumping.